All right, it's my second presentation on OpenLab, and not to beat you over the head with C#, but like C# is also C#. All right, so I talked about this last time. It's lab equipment control software over serial, which is a pretty common communication medium for that type of equipment. More targeted towards hobbyists. It's free, targeted at easy to use, targeted at being able to have other people modify it easily. And the way that people can do that is through a plugin framework that I've been working on over the past month or two. And also creating forms dynamically via configuration file, or actually have a edit functionality built in. I'll show you that later. So I actually just pushed out release 1.0, which I'm very excited about. It's stable enough that it's usable. I still have to add a couple of plugins, and I'll get to that later. But so what's in release 1.0? It has a plugin framework for form controls. So if you want to write your own toggle, it has a certain image and a certain whatever you want to run the form. You can do that. It hooks right into the update thread, and it'll update that form with serial data. Or if you want to have a new button or whatever you can possibly imagine, you can draw it directly to the form with a plugin. Loading config from XML works. It's pretty straightforward. It has dependency checking for plugins if you don't have them. Besides that, it loads up the coordinate data XY with height, the command associated with whatever control you have, or commands depending on the control. On-the-fly editing, like I said, and saving it all back to XML, which is kind of interesting because there's a function it calls on each plugin. So the plugin generates its own XML, which is put directly into the global config file. Obstacles in this project. What to put in the program versus what the plugins should handle. I'm still sort of trying to figure that out. I think there's a better way to do file saving where the plugins can pass a dictionary back instead of a XML document. Kind of shortens up the code a little bit, makes it neater for writing plugins. Threading. In order to keep the form from freezing when you're collecting data over serial, that's all handled in a separate thread. The problem with that is that if that's a separate instance and you can't directly modify the form with the data you're getting over serial. Now I'll explain how that was resolved. .NET and serial is buggy. In my last presentation, I unplugged it and it crashed. That's the problem with the disposing method. There's a wrapper that I found online that fixes this pretty well, so I'm using that. And .NET and context menus are broken on the second level. So if you have a context menu, right-click, and you click on whatever one of the direct child elements, the context menu strip has an item called source control, which is a pointer to the parent element. The problem, though, is that while it works fine with one level of depth to your context menu, if you have a second drop-down off of a menu item, source control is now null, and that's a known bug, at least from what I could find online, but it's very irritating. So the outcomes for this, reflection for plugins. Thank you for suggesting that. I actually found some open source code that does all that for you. Loads it from a directory that you give it, finds the DLLs, checks that they're compatible. It's pretty flawless. Interfaces for compatibility. So I have like a iControl interface that all the controls implement, which keeps them compatible with the application, make sure they have all the required functions, stuff like that. Delegates for callbacks. So a delegate is basically a structure that allows you to pass a function as an argument, which is great for doing threading, where you have to call a function in a plugin. You can use a delegate for that. .NET and serial, I mentioned. Safe serial port is the program I found, or the source file I found. And context menus, there's a workaround for that, which is when you right-click on an element to bring up the context menu, there's a hook that's called opening that's meant to be able to cancel the event if you don't want the context menu to open for some reason. But what you can do is sort of, you can use that to save a copy of source control, the source control pointer in a global variable, and then when you need to call that, you just use global variable instead of using source control. It's kind of ugly, it does work though. Work left to do is a calibration interface, so an eye calibration interface. Should be pretty easy to implement. Hooks into the right click when you right click on control. And then logging interface, so you can log to CSV, I don't know, binary, whatever you want with your plugin. And that'll be in the main menu. And demo. Hopefully this won't crash, it probably will, just like last time. So here's the default form. Serial, you have all your serial options, a little neater than before. If you unplug your serial port, it should update, so now COM4 is missing. Now it's not going away. All right, so baud rate parity, all the stuff you want from serial port driver. Update interval is how quickly the update thread sends out commands and gets responses. About shows you all the currently loaded plugins. Those are just in the plugins directory and happen to have the right version, the right interface. So you can load up config files. So this is a power supply config file. This is just random noise coming with your Arduino right now, but ideally you'd have this hooked up some sort of equipment. You can toggle your high voltage on and off. That just sends whatever command you have linked to it. Kilovolts allows you to set the power supply kilovolts or whatever you want. But the kind of cool thing about this is that you can edit it. So resize the form, I don't know, drag your controller around, resize the group box, and then you can say save, reconnect, and it works just fine. The thing I realized a couple days ago, which is unexpected but kind of a cool feature, is that you can load a second config file on top of another configuration file. And what that results in is kind of like a modular configuration files. So you can have, let's say you have a piece of equipment that has a certain, toggle, certain number of toggle switches, certain number of displays. You can have your own configuration file for that, distribute it, and then when people want to add that into their equipment on their form, they can just load it in. That works. Let me save this again. Next, and then, well, this is just a dummy one. But yeah, so that works. And then for editing, real quick, you right click, you can say, oh, I don't like this group box here. Control title, change the title, it actually resizes when you do that, which is kind of cool. And then control settings. So these are the commands that it's sending over serial. You can put in whatever you want. These are static. The ones that aren't are like for the spinners and stuff like that, where it's just the value is appended on the end of the command you give it. I'd like to make that customizable in case you have a custom command or something like that. But then you have all the different settings for that plugin. And thank you to Sean O'Sullivan, Dorothy, thank you, Goldschmidt, and all of our hosts for excellent suggestions. Any questions? Yes, Drew.
I think this is your first presentation, but from a UI standpoint, having to go through all the menus to extend stuff sounds like a real pain in the neck. Particularly if you just want to check that all the settings are right, because you have to go through each of them. Having a single properties window or something like that.
For the whole project?
For each component. So when you click on a component for one of those controls, it will give you all of the configuration information. So like spinner, for example.
Yep.
Obviously there's like 8 settings or something. If you can see all those at once, that would be really great.
Like, would you want to be also be able to set them all at once, or just see?
Ideally, yeah. I mean, not all at once. I can click on each
Yeah.
one or something. But being able to see this, what value which one is set to. Would be all better than having to go through each of them. And have you been testing with any kind of hard testing?
Well, the setup I have now, but no, I need to do it.
Okay. I've never seen anything that uses like RCOS. So if you would come up with like a 9-4 RS 45 wrapper for that.
Yep.
Which probably exists already. That would be pretty useful, but I think communication ends up being a little complex. So I'm not sure if you can support it without having some other sort of layer between what we have now and communication.
Sure. Absolutely. You said RS.
Search for GPID, general purpose instrumentation bus. It's very much a standard program platform. It's a 4-wire, 2 pairs of actually similar, but it's just simple. There's a lot of like overhead using documentation structure.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. GPID you said, right? Anything else?